the other thing is leveraging technology to improve the day-to-day process steps that may be taking a lot of time away from the supply chain teammates and allowing them to focus on those larger disruptions rather than those day-to-day unfilled orders. So leveraging technology that can help with that process is definitely helpful.
Without supplies, there's no surgery. Without products, there's no patient care. Welcome to Power Supply, the healthcare supply chain podcast focused on helping you navigate the intricacies of logistics, purchasing, contracting, and supplier relationships. Each episode, we speak with healthcare executives, supply chain leaders, and innovative entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the loading dock to strategic sourcing, from buyers to the C-suite, and across the enterprise, we tackle the real-life issues impacting the healthcare supply chain. Whether you're tuning in for conversation or inspiration, we're glad you're here. You're just in time to hear it from the source and stock up on insight. So sit back and plug into Power Supply.
On this episode of Power Supply, we will speak with Sarah Kerin, founder and CEO at efficientSC, and it's all about back orders today. But honestly, Hayes, isn't it all about back orders every day?
It certainly seems there's plenty of back orders to be had, and she's going to talk about it, and she's going to give us some solutions, some ideas, and things that she's seen. So you need to stick around and learn more about back orders, so come on.
All right, Sarah Kerin coming up next. Stay with us, everybody.
Bam! I'm Hayes Walder.
This is Gary Skinner.
And I'm Justin Poole.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to Power Supply.
We are speaking now with Sarah Kerin, founder and CEO at efficientSC, and a lot of work around back order management. You've been working on the front lines in the past. You know all too well what a challenge this is these days, and we're really delighted to talk to you today about some improvements that can be made, and hopefully we'll just continue to be able to adjust, because the back orders, man, they are greater than they've ever been. And so, Sarah, welcome to the podcast, and thanks for coming on Power Supply.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited you're here too, because you and I talked about a year ago, I think, and you were kind of giving me a background on what you used to do. Give us a little kind of snapshot of what you used to work on and where, I guess.
Yeah, for the last over a decade, I've worked in the supply chain industries across healthcare and technology. So my first job in supply chain was at U Chicago Medicine. So learned hands-on the supply chain functions within a provider. And then from there, I actually left and joined Apple. So global supply chain, hardware manufacturing in the technology industry, and totally different than the healthcare industry, and learned a ton from that experience. And then after Apple, I transitioned back to healthcare and led procurement and supply chain at Kindbody, which is a women's health and IVF company. So various roles across the industry. And after Kindbody, started my own company called efficientSC, where we're helping hospitals manage back orders more effectively.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's a great background.
It's so nice, Sarah, it's so nice to hear the diverse background, because it just, when we hire out, we don't look always directly into the supply chain experience in healthcare. We look at those outside experiences where you bring those in. So just love the vast amount, bring it into our world to get us up to speed where we really need to be in the 22nd century. I'm throwing it out.
You're a man ahead of his time, Gary.
Yeah,
absolutely, brother.
He has no idea what time he is, but that's great.
Oh, that's awesome. So, Sarah, I mean, let's talk about what you ran into, like your experience dealing with this every single day. Like, just tell us like some common stories. I mean, there are people at all different levels of supply chain listening to this podcast. There are people who are a little bit newer. Maybe they're working more in like warehousing and materials and they get some exposure, but not a ton. And then obviously we've got people all the way at the top of the organization, and the larger the organization, the bigger the problem this is for them. So talk us about your personal experience with back orders.
Yeah, I think the resounding, oh, we all hate back orders kind of sets the stage here. But yeah, I think managing back orders is a constant challenge, right? Supply chain people are mining through spreadsheets and spreadsheets of data that's coming from various systems to understand usage as well as unfilled orders. They're meeting cross-functionally and collaborating on action items and next steps to solving these back orders, whether it may be, a piece of gauze or tegaderm or a medical device or an implant needed for the OR or a surgical case. And then, sometimes we're texting our sales reps to get those products in ASAP. If they have any trunk stock, they could drop off later today. And in other cases, we're paying 10x the price to get those products in. And I think it's this constant managing of chaos that leads to a lot of burnout in the supply chain teams. And that's, what my team was facing every day, constantly managing this chaos. And my first experience in the healthcare supply chain, I thought that was just how it worked. Like, I thought this was just supply chain. It was just this chaos. But then when I left and joined Apple, like, oh my gosh, like that was a eye-opening experience with, precise processes, end-to-end visibility, really improvement and efficiency across the board.
Can I jump in there, Sarah? I'd be curious at Apple, let's just say, for example, when you talk about transparency do all the manufacturers, everybody was working together as one? Is that what you're describing?
Yeah, I think it's a little different in other supply chain industries when you own the whole supply chain, right? Like we knew all the way from like raw materials to finished goods where our products were in progress. And so it's very different in healthcare, right? In healthcare, you are managing or you're ordering finished goods and you don't have a lot of visibility further up the supply chain. And if you're ordering through a distributor who's ordering through a manufacturer, there's a lot of layers. That visibility and that data transparency is not present. And it causes a lot of challenges and a lot of, opportunities for things to get missed or delayed.
And Sarah, I want to take it a little bit deeper. You talked about the distributor. That's where I was going. It seems like, the majority of our spend, in a lot of ways, is through our distributor, and we rely on them. You talked about finished goods, which I thought was well said, versus raw materials. I mean, stops to start, you owned it on that platform. But just weighing in on the distributors, how much are we leveraging that to get to the back order issue? How much are you seeing in your current state of distributor and maybe some other key stakeholders, key factors that associate with that?
I think the distributors play an important role in the supply chain industry. A lot of providers obviously use them for a lot of low unit of measure ordering and the ability to push a lot of volume through the system to get their products in overnight and have that kind of supply chain efficiency there. But I think the challenge with that is just visibility of their inventory and understanding what they're getting from the manufacturers and how that inventory is visible throughout the supply chain.
So, Sarah, I think also the fact that we need to have substitutes is also placing a strain on the supply chain as a result of all the back orders, because you're in a scenario where value analysis is either being bypassed, which is, a shortcut, or you're straining value analysis to identify approved substitutes whenever you are going to have a stock out due to a back order. Do you want to kind of talk about that and the impact too? Because I feel like, it's a double whammy. Like, it's one thing to not have the product, but it's another thing in terms of the resiliency and sustainability planning that has also been layered on top of that.
Yeah, definitely. I think in other industries, building redundancy within your supply chain is a must, and it's a little bit easier, right? Like you can stand up a new manufacturing line and create that same product with a new manufacturer. But in healthcare, we don't have that, right? Like we have regulatory restraints, 510K approvals. And when these disruptions occur with one manufacturer, everyone is going to this other manufacturer. And so it just exacerbates the problem even further. But I think one other challenge that hospitals face is tracking these substitutes and understanding which products are approved for which departments and which clinical teams. Because as much as we'd like to standardize across the system, a lot of times there's a lot of nuances of what can be used in the OR versus med surg areas versus the PICU. And so I think hospitals definitely are struggling with the ability to track all of this information and understand what product is approved for something that's on back order.
Yeah. I mean, the clinicians also didn't have a whole lot of visibility to what was happening initially. And so to your point, like, yeah, there's understanding, which products can be substitutes, but then you have the layered nuance of which one's where. But then you also just have like, all of a sudden it's not on the shelf. There's something new on the shelf and clinicians aren't necessarily aware of what the change was, why it happened. And it really does put strain on the relationship between the clinicians and supply chain, because without that kind of visibility to what's happening or the involvement, like when you do make kind of a workaround and you bypass value analysis, there's no way you're communicating with everybody around that substitution that would need to know or be aware of that change, because it is just such a gigantic communication challenge.
Totally. It is such a challenge on the communication side. And a lot of times, from the supply chain mindset, an empty bin is like the worst possible thing ever. And so if we can just get something in the bin, just to make sure there's not, something missing, we'll do it. And that communication also, ends up coming down to secondary, tertiary priorities.
So let's talk about kind of the other side of the equation, right? We've talked a lot about the impact on healthcare and the people trying to deliver the care on the front lines, working in the hospital or with the health system. But what is like really the root cause? What is happening? And I think a lot of us are gaining a lot more awareness around what's happening, but I'd love to hear you talk a little bit further on this. Is what is happening kind of behind these supply chain efficiencies from back orders? Like what's the root cause of this disruption?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of moving parts here. And I think one of the challenges is like we all became very lean in the lean transformation journey. And so as everyone's supply chain became lean, it becomes more fragile. And so not having that right product in the right place at the right time can cause a lot of issues when you have, product lines that aren't offering production as much as it needs to be done. Also, there are production lines that are low margin and sometimes get reprioritized at the manufacturer level. And those products are commodities or items that may be necessary for clinical care, but they oftentimes don't have as much production that needs to be met for demand, especially if another shortage is happening and then demand fluctuates and increases for that manufacturer.
So, Kerin, we've identified that problem, key factors. What are some of the strategic solutions you've seen from technology to diversification? What are you seeing out there that are some best practices you could share with our listeners today?
Yeah, I think one, diversifying suppliers. So understanding which suppliers within your supply chain are single source and understanding how you can have substitutes and alternatives identified and pre-approved and tracked pretty effectively. The other thing is leveraging technology to improve the day-to-day process steps that may be taking a lot of time away from the supply chain teammates and allowing them to focus on those larger disruptions rather than those day-to-day unfilled orders. So leveraging technology that can help with that process is definitely helpful.
All right, this is a random question, but generally on the substitution products, do they have to go through value analysis as well?
I think it depends. Different value analysis teams have different processes. And so a lot of times, like Justin said earlier, like if it's a urgent backorder situation, value analysis sometimes gets bypassed.
Right. That's what I was
for better or worse,
yeah.
Right? But definitely, I think, the best practice would be, understanding what your value analysis constraints are and your criteria of what does go through that committee. Because then you don't want to put everything through the committee where, now the agenda is pages and pages and no time to get to real strategic initiatives.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought.
Hayes, I'm going to step up and say that was a great question, by the way. Great question, Hayes.
Wow.
Agreed.
This is a breakthrough moment.
Can we clip that? And I need to keep that around. That didn't
Yeah.
happen often. No.
No, that's a really good point, though. Seriously, I mean, they're always coming, and you've got to triage it now. To your point, these subs are coming all the time, and we're not ready to move. We can't take them through VAT because they got to come now, right? Sub
Yeah.
pops up. It's like we don't have the timing of that new technology, that new product. It's got to be pre-approved. I think you said that really well. Being ready for diversification and just being ready to be nimble in our supply chain world. I think you're right on.
Yeah. And I think having, like you said, pre-approved, like items that are, on that back burner or item B that we're ready. Once A is out of stock, we can quickly switch in for B and then just communicate and focus on the communication versus getting that product approved, getting a sample in, reviewing it with clinical teams, emailing and confirming that approval. If we can do a lot of that up front in a much easier, more effective way, then when A is out of stock, we can flip in B and move forward and focus on the next best thing.
We were talking about best practices there. You talked about diversifying. How do you manage demand planning in this scenario, right? Like, I feel like a lot of times the manufacturers are saying to healthcare, hey, we could do a lot better together if you could give us any kind of like predictable demand and demand signals, et cetera. But then all of a sudden you're throwing in these back orders, and that's not making it any easier on healthcare to do demand planning effectively, especially with any kind of forecasting. And obviously it's a unique industry when it comes to, being able to do forecasting. So many things come up that are, unanticipated, especially if you're talking trauma. But there is some seasonality to it, and there are some things you can do. But then all of a sudden you bring in the back orders, and it's like, how could I ever give you some sort of consistent forecast if I don't know what you're going to have on hand when I need it?
Totally. It's kind of like this catch-22. And also, too, if one hospital provides really good demand forecasting to the manufacturers or the distributors, it doesn't make that big of an impact, right? Like, they need the aggregate of all the health systems providing all their demand plans to be able to actually forecast and build a better supply chain going forward. Like in other industries, customers will forecast demand for their suppliers and they're held to that. And there's key requirements and fill rates and things that are written into the contract. And I think because of how fragile the supply chain is, we're not there yet. But I think it is something we should all work towards where we can get better. But it does take the whole industry to move in this direction to be able to really make a change.
But have back orders gotten worse in the last, maybe since COVID, or better?
So from what I'm hearing is, they were bad before COVID. We had all of those shortages happening. They got real bad during COVID, and they're still pretty bad. And so I think it's kind of like that pre-COVID time of that back order level.
Right.
We're not as bad as COVID. We've gotten through that. But there have been, significant shortages that have happened in the last, 6 months that have really rocked the industry that show that there hasn't been much progress that has been made to really improve.
And we're having the same issue on the pharmaceutical side as well. And so I'm just curious that it doesn't seem like we've solved a lot of these issues in the last several years when you'd have thought that we would be over some of them.
So Sarah, I think what Hayes is saying is really important. And I think to an extent, we had some limitations, right? I mean, let's start with some really basic stuff like UDI. Right. We don't even have, and you talked about Apple. The other thing Apple had going for it is, it pretty much had product numbers and SKUs and everything and global identifiers and all the things we don't have in healthcare. And really the supply chain leaders were leading the full end-to-end delivery of product coming off the line. And in healthcare, we've sort of got two different parties, right? We've got kind of this front end side that is supply chain, but then the clinicians are actually leading strategy and a lot of the, sort of procurement and preference, like PPI is something that wouldn't exist in other industries and is a major challenge for our supply chain, right? But when it comes to like technology, I also feel like healthcare is just really lagging. I wonder if you feel like, the emergent, you can speak to any technologies, but I feel like AI is making some of these things possible for under-resourced supply chain departments. It just wasn't possible before.
Yeah, Justin, totally agree with you on like the physician preference and clinical preference that drives a lot of the supply chain decision making within our industry, which is very different than other industries. So if we think about like that comparison, that alone is pretty a big gap and a big change from other industries. As far as new technologies coming to market, I think healthcare has historically always been behind in technology, whether it's, on the business side as well as on, patient facing technology as well. I think AI is going to lead a change here. I think hospitals don't know what to do yet with AI. There's a lot of, governance and a lot of oversight that needs to be implemented and a lot of policies that need to oversee and understand how to even implement an AI technology solution. But I think even if we take a couple steps back, there's technology that doesn't include AI that still can make a huge difference for healthcare supply chain teams. And there's a lot of point solutions out there that can help with specific areas that will help drive change. And I know we've gotten to a point where now we have this technology overload, right? That we don't want another tool in the health system and we don't want to add something else. It adds a lot of complexity. But if it's doing something really well, my philosophy is if it can help drive value and bring ROI, that's really important.
So let's go a little bit further. Let's keep diving into it, right? How can technology help us overcome some of the barriers to implementation of any kind of technology, right? Like, is technology capable of giving us the kind of ROI? Like, I feel like there's oftentimes this little bit of a chicken and the egg kind of game where you're sitting there going, hey, we want to adopt technology, but there's this cost that's coming in up front. And how do we know it's really going to yield the savings or the return on investment that we're looking for? And so they get caught in this stalemate. How do you overcome some of those barriers? And are there some attributes to certain types of technology that help with that? Because it's one thing to say like something globally, like, we have AI. Well, that's great. But what's your use case? How do you apply it? But then there's like more specific design solutions where you can say like, listen, this is predicted, of exactly the amount of man hours that we can save your organization. Right. So can you talk through some of that?
Yeah, no, great point. And especially too, like a lot of times new technology helps measure things that we weren't measuring before. And so I think a lot of times you're like, well, I wasn't measuring that before. So if I'm going to reduce that, how does that help me with my, technology proposal? And so I think one way that health systems work through this is having a pilot or an introductory agreement with the technology to understand, hey, let's try this out and see how it works and measure the ROI so that we can understand what it will look like in a full implementation as we roll it out. Maybe we start with one site versus multiple sites, and then we roll it out throughout the system. So I think I've seen, different health systems take different approaches to that, whether it's site specific or department specific, or even just like a super user specific where one person is going to lead this and understand it deeply and then understand what this ROI is in this small area that can then expand out more broadly. That's a really important approach, that kind of like crawl, walk, run philosophy.
Yeah, I love that. Like, get a proof of concept in place, and kind of earn the opportunity to expand it out. I think that helps a ton because you can kind of dip your toe in it without taking a big financial risk. And then say, because typically what will happen is if you can get that to be just enough of a size to get leadership attention so that they would actually pay attention, they would want to know what the results are, getting it to just that level where you can get on their radar. As soon as you show a win, they're going to be like, okay, how do we do more of this? And that crawl, walk, run is definitely the right approach.
Totally. And I also feel like sometimes it's hard to get, the technology approved through the system. There's a lot of steps, there's a lot of committees, there's a lot of review, and a lot of times people don't know the process, right? Like maybe the last time they implemented a technology was a couple years ago. And so understanding that, I think is something you can do in your supply chain team and just trying to learn how does that even work within our system.
I have to ask this question. Now you sell technology to hospital systems, which you used to be in the hospital system. How do you view companies that come in now, like yourself, as compared to where you used to be? Are you frustrated with the speed, the barriers? Tell me about that.
Great question, Hayes. Well, I sat on the strategic sourcing side, so I was across the table from vendors all the time. So I'm definitely getting my karma coming back to me.
In spades, probably, right?
Yeah, but what I try and do is just like I said, try and help the people learn what their process is internally and understand what we can do to help walk them through that, right? Is it like an ROI analysis that we can help prepare, understanding like a project plan and mapping out the next steps and documenting that so everyone's all on the same page. I think all of that just helps decrease the confusion and increase the clarity.
That's a really good reply, because I think a lot of them probably do need some. You could help give them guidance on the ROI and things like that they just wouldn't have the time or the resources to do.
Well, here's another one, and this one's funny because I think, you probably have experienced this frustration, in both your prior role and this one, and it's for good reason, that this is happening, but a big change in the industry is like, if you are going to bring on some technology, just the IT sourcing requirements are just enormous nowadays. Moving through that with any kind of speed can be a big, big difficulty. I mean, I feel like those departments are equally, if not even more so, under-resourced, and it's not just the IT sourcing team, but it's the people that have to then do the implementation work that tend to bog this down sometimes. Now, if you weren't that IT sourcing leader yourself and you were in a supply chain role and you're trying to bring in technology in the past, you might experience frustration just the same as the vendor who's experiencing frustration trying to move through that process. Do you have any good tips or tricks, or do you just want to empathize with our listeners?
I empathize. It takes time. It's definitely takes time to get through the process. I think one of the things that you can always help with is just try and keep like a bi-weekly meeting, or just try and keep some momentum going to make sure things don't fall off, because the IT teams are under-resourced and they're dealing with a lot of technologies, and a lot of times our supply chain things are not the top of their list, right? They're focused on EMR opportunities and advancements and other things that may drive bigger ROI.
We were talking earlier about, artificial intelligence and its use and role in supply chain and those type of things. I was talking to an executive recently, last week, I think it was, and I was asking him, in his present day, his, current role, does he use any AI? And he's like, we're not allowed to here. He goes, we literally cannot even access ChatGPT on our computers. And so it's just the structure that IT has put over that for good reason, obviously, but you could just see how that could slow down that process, and trying to show and develop. And like, there's some good tools out there, but sometimes it takes a while to get them instituted, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I've seen some health systems stand up another AI committee within IT. And so adds more layers, more eyes, more things to kind of,
more time
into the process. Yeah.
All right. As we're kind of coming to a close here, like, I'd like to leave the audience with some actionable next steps, and they can be very simple steps, but I think there are definitely some takeaways that people can just try to improve their life on back orders. I mean, we've got a power supply advisory group, and back orders is a constant conversation when we get together on a monthly basis and just talk about challenges that they're facing. So, we'd love to just kind of put this out there. Like, what's one simple step that our listeners could take in the next 30 days to help, move towards a more manageable operation when it comes to back orders?
I have more general advice that I was kind of thinking about, which is like challenge the status quo, and just maybe, as we've thought about back orders in the past, maybe there's something new that we can do to tackle this going forward, and understanding like the optimism mindset of just like, it's not no because, it's yes if, and how can we channel that with new technologies, with new processes, and better improve the back order process.
Hayes, anything you want to add?
No, I just think it's a fascinating space, or in time we're in. There's some incredible tools out there available to everybody, but in order to get them, in the process doing it the right way. It takes time. Meanwhile, we've got manufacturers that are still struggling with their own manufacturing processes and things. So it's a convoluted, messed up time right now, and we need some good technologies, good processes put in place, and to help us all, to help every health system in America. So, I appreciate you coming on here a lot, Sarah. This was really helpful.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun. Would love to do it again.
Yes. We might just replace Gary with you. I mean, at least you stayed the entire time.
I'm in.
All right. Well, that was good. That was easy. Sorry, Gary.
Yeah. Sarah, good luck with all your efforts to help in this too. Like, I know you're working on some solutions, and, definitely you're, in that tech space yourself. And, I think you're working hard to transform kind of the difficulties that surround this topic. So I want to wish you well in that. And absolutely, let's have you back on in like a year or so and hear how it's going.
Yeah, no, happy to help any way I can. I was just joking, but and thank you for having me.
You don't want to replace Gary?
I wasn't.
I would.
I wasn't joking.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. It is hard. It's like the time that it takes to get things through the process is just long. And so, we're making a lot of progress, just, focusing on, our core features and areas there. So thanks. Appreciate the kind of getting this together and being on this. Appreciate it.
That was Sarah Kerin, founder and CEO at efficientSC, and we're talking back order management, opportunities for improvement, how you can leverage technology. And, I think she does a great job of empathizing because she's done the job. She's had to live through it, Hayes. And certainly, we kind of talked a little bit about it at the very end, but she's working on a solution to really help manage this. And I feel like the back order problem or the back order challenge just gets more and more complicated every day. It's
clearly complicated and it's hard to solve. And so it is going to take a transparent solution to do it. And I think that's what she's working on, but she highlighted the problem really well. She's got good energy, talked a lot of, real world things that she saw. And so it was really wonderful. She did a great job.
Yeah, she's got a great energy. And so easy to stay engaged with Sarah during the conversation today. Really enjoyed having her on. And on behalf of Hayes, Gary, and myself, thanks for listening to this episode of
Power Supply.
Bam!
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Power Supply. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on your iPhone or Android. Simply search for Power Supply in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@powersupplymedia.net. We look forward to hearing from you.